these last double or Nubatama cards might not be direct dominate support, but they are looking quite spicy for the clan.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another extra edition of Cardfight Update. Today we're going to take a look at the last high rarity cards that were revealed last Friday, and those are of course the last double Rs for Nubatama, which are going to be very interesting support cards for the clan as a whole, because they can be used in any kind of strategy as they have such wide range of applications for what type of build you want to play. But there is also one more high rarity card that was revealed in the last couple of days, and that's the last double R for Great Nature. So without further ado, let's jump straight into these 3 different double Rs and see what they can do for the respective clans. And we're going to start off with the new double R for Great Nature, which is Blusher Parakeet. And this card is a double R that somewhat goes along with the video that we did yesterday talking about the big belly support cards, as this card does synergize with that engine but can also work with different strategies within Great Nature, because its ability is auto on Vanguard and Vanguard circle. When placed, cost counterblast 1. Look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 grade free from among them, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. This unit gets power plus 3k until the end of turn, and if this unit is on a rearguard circle at the end of the turn, retire this unit. So just in a generic sense, for 1 counterblast you could potentially fetch a grade 3 from your deck, and this thing turns into a 12k unit, and at the end of the turn you need to sacrifice it. So it trades itself off for a counterblast. You can change this thing into a grade 3, and then it also is a bit stronger of an attacker. You can potentially run this in any type of Great Nature build to have more consistency towards your grade 3s, as this can also be your grade 2 right target, and if it's your right target, then it doesn't kill itself, which basically translate itself into a plus, but that's not good enough to actually run this card in your typical Great Nature list. There are basically 2 applications for this card, and the first one is the Isabel engine, as in the Isabel engine you could potentially use this effect multiple times before it retires itself at the end of the turn, because you can use it, called from hand, use its ability, and then activate the Isabel skill to reactivate this effect. The issue is, however, is that it will cost a lot of counterblast, and as soon as the Isabel engine doesn't have a countercharge available to them like Big Belly, means it's probably not the correct play in the current circumstances. But it is something to think about, because Isabel has very powerful grade 3s, especially the Isabels as soon as they work on the rearguard circle. So having a card like this in that deck might actually be a interesting idea for a future potential when they get a count charge available to them. The main application for this card is of course the Big Belly engine, and that's for multiple reasons. One, it kills itself at the end of the turn, so it synergizes with Big Belly, and with Big Belly you then get the draw of it as well. But there are bigger things here, because there are 2 major factors that work in favor of this card. One of those things is that this card searches for grade 3s, and as we discussed in yesterday's video, the Big Belly deck probably runs multiple grade 3s or specific grade 3s that works really well with Big Belly. You have Flow Panther that can put itself back into the soul, so you can activate Big Belly's full power on a consistent basis on your second grade 3 turn. But probably there is going to be a run on the deck with Hamden, and Hamden could potentially cheat you the full power of Big Belly on the very first grade 3 turn that you ride it. But in order to do that, you need 3 grade 3s in your hand. You need Hamden, you need your Big Belly, and then another grade 3 which you can put into the soul with Hamden. This is where Blusher Parakeet comes into play, because it allows you to get to those grade 3 on a consistent basis, especially in combination with Mini Belly that can also filter for your grade 3s. But there is another thing, the second part to this which makes this card really good, is that the fact that this grade 2 it gets an additional plus 3k power. And if you remember from yesterday's video, is that the issue with the Big Belly deck as it is that it just barely misses the 20k threshold with all the grade 1s and grade 2s, as they are 18k and 19k. This card is 12k on its own ability, and then with the 10k of Hamden or the 10k of your Fosser or Fossa, then it turns itself into a 22k unit just like your grade 3s, which then allows it to be restand with Big Belly. So not only does this card help you with some consistency problems, it also turns itself into a solid 12k unit, which then can be translated into a above 20k power unit. and it retires itself potentially so you get more draws of a Big Belly skill. This is a really good grade 2 double R for the Big Belly engine, and sure, it does cost a count less, but as we discussed, Big Belly does have a count charge engine unlike Isabelle. So this is probably a really solid grade 2 for the Big Belly deck, and together with the Sheep and potentially Fossa or whatever grade 2 you want to run, your grade 2 lineup looks to be very, very solid. Now with the parakeet discussed, let's take a look at the 2 Nubatama cards, which is basically the main attraction of this video. And the first one we're going to talk about is Stealth Dragon Genkai, and they're both grade 2s and they're both iconic Dominate support grade 2s, which is ironic because they're not actually Dominate support cards, as you see in the skills for this card, as its abilities are Continuous Rigid Circle. During your turn, if you have a token unit, all of your token units and this unit gets power plus 5k. And it also has a second ability, Auto Rigid Circle. When placed, choose one of your rear guards and it gets boost until the end of turn. If you choose a unit other than this unit, Soul Charge 1. So there are a couple things here. The first skill that allows you to give passively plus 5k to your tokens. You can think, oh, this is really good with the Dominate token as it is a token. Yes, it gives another 5k, which could be very important if you dominate a grade 1, which cannot directly hit high enough to put a dent into Force grade 3s, for example, which could be beneficial. But is that good enough? Probably not, because in most scenarios you're probably going to choose a grade 3 because of the twin drive on that card. And the fact that this gets a grade 5k power is nice, but not that important. What is important for this card is that if you use the decoy token playstyle, then this 5k power can add up, because you can have multiple decoy tokens and then all getting 5k power could be big. And that is especially with its second ability, because with its second ability you can give one of those decoy tokens boost, which then means you actually get value out of those 5k power you give to those units, as the decoy tokens themselves don't have inherently boost even though they're grade 0s. So that, combined with the grade 2 Zangetsu that also give those units extra 5k power, could actually make those decoy tokens hit hard. But on top of that, there's even more synergy between all those things, because this card on place gets you Soul. A lot of the Nubatama decks works with multiple grade 3s, and some of them really needs grade 3s into the Soul. This could help you getting those grade 3s early on into Soul by RNG. Also, a lot of Nubatama decks uses a lot of Soul for their powerful skills, so getting this free Soul Charge is also pretty nice. But you might not always have to put this thing onto a decoy token. You can also use this to put grade 2s and grade 3s the ability to also just boost and just have a full aggressive board at all stages of the game. Because in some cases you might have a hand cluttered with grade 2s and grade 3s, and that could be detrimental for your late game pushes. With this ability, you can circumvent that issue to some extent. And in a Akatsuki Hanzo build, you could actually take that up a notch, and you can call this thing, give a grade 3 boost ability, then bounce your board, accept that grade 3, just keep it onto the board, it already has the boost ability, then call another grade 3 to the back row, then call Genkai again and give the other grade 3 a boost. This allows you to, even if you have a hand full of grade 3s, to still apply a lot of pressure against your opponent, because you can give multiple grade 3s to boost ability. So there are a lot of applications for this card. It can help you with the decoy token strategy. It could help you with your dominate unit to always hit your opponent's Vanguard, even if you need to dominate a grade 1. It can turn itself into a 14k booster, as you can give itself the boost ability, but you then lose out on the Soul Charge. So with all the shenanigans that you can do in Nubatama, there is a lot of options for this card, and what I just discussed is probably just a surface of the potential of Genkai. Now the second grade 2 that was revealed was yet again a older Dominate support card, and in this case is somewhat more useful to the Dominate engine than Genkai, as we have Stealth Dragon Furai. And Furai's abilities are Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, your opponent chooses a card from his or her hand, discard it, and draws a card. If a grade 0 was discarded, you draw a card. In the generic sense, this isn't a great skill, because giving your opponent a free cycle in most cases will benefit them. And that's because they get more consistency in their plays, as they can just filter their hand for a better card that they miss. So just doing this just for that potential that you could have a draw of the discarded trigger is definitely not good enough, as you definitely give your opponent more value than you give yourself, even though you technically plus for free. Now, what is interesting, however, is that this does synergize with the fact if you go first, because you go first, you go to grid 1, then your opponent goes second, they go to grid 1 and get the shield ticket. The shield ticket is probably the most ideal card to just discard, but the shield ticket is a grade 0, so if they discard the shield ticket, then you get the plus as well. Now you might ask to yourself, then what's the point of running this card? This particular effect, in my opinion, is mainly made for the dominate deck. Because if you went first and you go up to your grade 3 and you want to dominate something of your opponent's side of their drop zone or their field or whatever, if they didn't call anything and they have nothing in a drop zone, if they didn't guard or they didn't need to guard because your early game offensive might not be good enough, then you have nothing to dominate and you just stay there for a turn. And if you do that on your grade 3 turns, which need to be your big plays, then there's a big chance you just lost that game. Now, Furai basically gives you an extra chance to get a unit to be able to dominate because your opponent is going to discard a card from their hand into the drop zone. So there's at least a target available to you. This is somewhat similar to what the hgigh dominate support cards did, that they force your opponent to call units to the board so you can dominate them. This is somewhat of a homage to that effect. So this helps you to achieve that. And if your opponent wants to play clever and discard the shield ticket, then you get the draw for free, which could actually benefit you to some extent. So that's the whole thing about Furai, that it helps you to get those targets. Now, the second ability of Furai is somewhat reminiscent that we've seen in the older cards in Nubatama, which helps it to be a very versatile card for every archetype, but can also help the dominate deck to be some bit more aggressive right out of the gate. Because its second ability is Auto Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When it attacks, costs Counterblast 1 and return another rearguard to your hand. So any rearguard except for himself, be it in the back row of its own column or from the other column. And one of your units get power plus 6k until the end of turn. If this unit is on the Vanguard Circle, draw a card. So for a Counterblast, you bounce one of your own units and you can give another unit plus 6k, which can also be your Vanguard, which can help you to be more aggressive right out of the gate. And if this card was your Vanguard unit, then you can also draw a card. And ideally you want to ride this thing, especially in a dominate deck, because of its first ability, which means you can get a lot of value out of this skill. So what this card allows you to do is have another bouncer onto the board, which can synergize with Hanzo, it can synergize even with Magatsu Storm, but probably this is mainly used to give any Nubatama deck a more aggressive early game, because you can just write this thing, call whatever you want to the side columns, and then at least attack with one of the side columns, and then attack with the Vanguard column, and give itself 6k power and the potential draw in the early game. And even if your opponent hits the defensive trigger, you can still potentially overcome this with the 6k power and the potential booster behind it. And it also negates the potential that your opponent can damage deny you to ramming into your rearguards as you just bounce it back to your hand. So there are definitely the OG plays that you can do with this card that were available with Magatsu Gil, I believe, or Magatsu Gil, the other grade 2, that could also bounce something onto the board in the early game. So this is just a good early aggro game potential, and with the extra draw on top of it, could help securing the Shiranuis that you need in your hand to do your grade 3 plays. So as we've seen, these two new support cards are pretty solid for any type of archetype within Nubatama. We've seen it for Akatsuki Hanzo, it works with Magatsu Storm, even with Shiranui. The only archetype which probably has a less benefit of this is Jamio Kongo. So I think these cards are pretty good for just the clan as a whole. Might not be as solid for the dominate deck, but that doesn't mean that this is where the dominate deck stops, because tomorrow we're gonna have another live stream, and I'm not sure, I thought I read somewhere that tomorrow we're going to get the last Nubatama cards, so the last rares, which are going to be dominate support cards. But I could be wrong here. I haven't really seen any confirmation whatsoever. I just know that I read that somewhere. But who knows, we might also get the order card, because the order card for this set has yet to be revealed. Maybe this time it's actually going to be a good order card, because the last two order cards were quite of a missers. So we have to wait and see what tomorrow has in store for us, as there is a lot of room to expand, especially for Shiranui, because the dominate deck is looking really interesting. But I think it could really use one or two more cards that could help the deck be a little bit stronger out of the gate, because that grade 1 promo card is really good, but it's a promo card. We need something in the set, so at least we at the West have something that we know is gonna be for us, available to us. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of the new Genkai and Furai, as well as Bloodshura Parakeet, which is probably the best grade 2 in the lineup for Big Belly, as it helps you to actually do everything what the deck wants to do. So let me know in the comments down below all your thoughts and opinions. And as always guys, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.